behind the golden gates of royal residences, where protocol reigns supreme and hierarchy determines every breath, there exists a world most will never witness. It's a realm where a single decision by a guard can change the course of relationships that shape nations. This is the extraordinary true account of Staff Sergeant Michael Harrison, a decorated Royal Protection Officer whose unwavering commitment to duty created ripples that reached the highest echelons of the British monarchy. In the corridors where whispers carry more weight than proclamations, where loyalty is tested in moments of impossible choices, one man's courage to uphold protocol against overwhelming pressure would expose the delicate tensions within the royal family itself. This is not just a story about denied access. It's about the price of principle, the weight of responsibility, and the moment when doing what's right collides with doing what's expected. What happened on that fateful Tuesday morning would remain classified for months, discussed only in hushed tones among palace staff, who understood that some truths are more dangerous than secrets. But now, for the first time, the complete story can be told. A story that reveals how sometimes the most powerful act of loyalty is knowing when to say no. The morning mist clung to the ancient stones of Windsor Castle like secrets waiting to be revealed. Staff Sergeant Michael Harrison adjusted his crisp uniform and checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. 22 years of military service had taught him the value of precision, but his 18 months as a Royal Protection Officer had shown him that in the palace, timing meant everything. The East Wing corridor stretched before him, its walls lined with portraits of monarchs whose eyes seemed to follow his every movement. Michael had been assigned to Catherine's private quarters since dawn, a routine posting that should have been as predictable as the changing of the guard. The Princess of Wales had a full schedule ahead, including a charity luncheon and meetings with palace advisors. Security protocols were straightforward. Clearance lists had been reviewed twice, and everything pointed to another ordinary Tuesday in the extraordinary world of royal protection. Michael's radio crackled softly against his chest.
"Harrison, this is Control. Status report on Princess Catherine's wing." His voice remained steady as he responded. "All clear. Control. No movement detected."
Princess Catherine departed for morning engagements at 0800. The silence that followed was comfortable, familiar. In his line of work, quiet moments were treasures to be appreciated. But peace in the palace was often an illusion, and Michael had learned to read the subtle signs that preceded storms. The way footsteps echoed differently when someone walked with purpose rather than leisure. The particular cadence of voices that carried urgency disguised as calm. The almost imperceptible shift in air pressure that seemed to announce the arrival of someone accustomed to commanding attention. At precisely 9:47, Michael heard those telltale signs approaching from the main staircase. Heels clicked against marble with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, never been asked to wait, never been denied access to any room in any palace. The sound grew closer, accompanied by the softer footfalls of what Michael assumed were ladies' maids or private secretaries. His training kicked in automatically, straightening his posture and shifting his weight to a position that allowed for quick movement in any direction. Queen Camilla appeared at the far end of the corridor, her presence immediately transforming the atmosphere. She moved with the practiced grace of someone who had spent decades learning to carry herself as royalty, yet there was an urgency in her step that Michael found unusual. Behind her walked 2 ladies-in-waiting and a private secretary whose nervous energy was palpable even from a distance. Michael had encountered Queen Camilla numerous times during his service. She was known among the protection detail as someone who respected boundaries while maintaining an air of approachable authority. Unlike some members of the royal family who seemed to view security personnel as invisible fixtures, Camilla made it a point to acknowledge the human beings whose job it was to protect her family. She remembered names, asked about families, and understood that respect flowed both ways in the complex ecosystem of royal service. As she approached Catherine's private suite, Michael stepped forward with practiced precision. His movements were neither aggressive nor deferential, but rather embodied the professional balance that had been drilled into him during months of specialized training. "Your Majesty," he said, offering a respectful nod while maintaining the alert posture that signified he was on active duty. "Good morning, Sergeant Harrison," Camilla replied, her voice carrying the refined tone that had been carefully cultivated over years of public service. "I need to speak with Catherine. Is she in her chambers?" The question seemed simple enough, but Michael's trained instincts detected something beneath the surface. There was a tension in Camilla's voice, a slight tightness around her eyes that suggested this was not a social call. Michael's response was immediate and professional. "Your Majesty, Princess Catherine departed for her morning appointments approximately 2 hours ago. She is not expected to return until after the charity luncheon this afternoon." He watched as disappointment flickered across Camilla's features, followed quickly by what appeared to be frustration barely held in check. "I see," Camilla said, her tone remaining controlled despite the obvious setback. "In that case, I'll wait in her sitting room. I'm certain she won't mind, and we have important family matters to discuss." She moved toward the door as if the matter was settled, her entourage following in dutiful formation. This was the moment that would define Michael's career and test every principle he had sworn to uphold. His clearance protocols were crystal clear. Access to Catherine's private quarters was restricted to a very specific list of individuals, and that access was granted only when Catherine herself was present to authorize it. The list included immediate family members, certain staff with explicit permission, and emergency personnel under specific circumstances. Even senior members of the royal family were bound by these security measures, though such restrictions were rarely enforced due to the informal nature of family dynamics within the palace. Michael had faced challenging situations before, during his military service in Afghanistan and Iraq, but this was different. This was not about physical threats or battlefield decisions where right and wrong were clearly defined by survival. This was about navigating the treacherous waters of royal protocol while maintaining respect for hierarchy and personal relationships that had been decades in the making. "Your Majesty," Michael said, his voice steady despite the internal storm brewing within him, "I'm afraid I cannot permit access to Princess Catherine's private chambers without her explicit authorization. These are standing security protocols that apply to all areas of her personal residence." He maintained eye contact while speaking, a sign of respect that also demonstrated his unwavering commitment to his duty. The corridor seemed to hold its breath. Camilla's ladies-in-waiting exchanged glances that spoke volumes about the unprecedented nature of what they were witnessing. In their collective decades of royal service, none could recall a moment when any member of the family had been denied access to another family member's quarters. The very suggestion seemed to challenge the fundamental assumptions about how the royal household operated. Camilla's expression underwent a subtle but significant transformation. The maternal warmth that typically characterized her interactions with staff was replaced by something cooler, more regal, more reminiscent of the authority she wielded as queen consort. "Sergeant Harrison," she said, her voice taking on a tone that had been carefully modulated through years of royal training, "I believe there may be some confusion about the hierarchy here. As queen consort, I have certain privileges and responsibilities that supersede routine security measures." Michael felt the weight of history pressing down upon him. He was acutely aware that his next words would either establish a precedent that could affect royal security protocols for years to come, or potentially end his career in royal service. The silence stretched between them, filled with the unspoken understanding that this moment was about much more than access to a room. "Your Majesty," Michael replied, his military training providing the backbone of courage he needed. "I have the utmost respect for your position and authority. However, my orders regarding Princess Catherine's private quarters are explicit and come directly from the head of royal protection. These protocols exist for the security and privacy of all family members, and I am not authorized to make exceptions, regardless of rank or relationship." The tension in the corridor was now palpable. Camilla's private secretary stepped forward slightly, as if preparing to intervene. But Camilla raised a subtle hand that stopped the movement immediately. She studied Michael's face with the calculating gaze of someone who had learned to read people quickly and accurately. In his unwavering expression, she saw not defiance or disrespect, but rather the kind of principled dedication that had made the British military and royal protection services legendary.
"I see," she said finally, her tone shifting once again.
"And if I were to contact the head of royal protection directly, would that change your position?" The question was posed as a test, and Michael recognized it as such. She was offering him an escape route, a way to defer responsibility while maintaining the facade of protocol compliance. Michael's response demonstrated why he had been selected for royal protection duty despite having no prior experience in personal security. "Your Majesty, you certainly have the right to contact any senior official you choose. However, until I receive direct authorization from my commanding officer or from Princess Catherine herself, I must maintain current security protocols." His voice carried no trace of smugness or defiance, only the steady resolve of someone committed to doing what he believed was right. The standoff continued for what felt like hours but was likely only minutes. During this time, Michael became acutely aware of every detail around him. The way morning light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the corridor. The faint sound of groundskeepers working in the gardens below. The almost imperceptible hum of climate control systems that maintained perfect conditions for priceless artwork and delicate furnishings. These details seemed amplified in the tension of the moment, as if his senses were trying to record every aspect of what might be his last day in royal service. Camilla's ladies-in-waiting remained frozen in position, uncertain whether to advance or retreat. Their training had prepared them for many scenarios, but not for witnessing a direct confrontation between their queen and a protection officer. The private secretary clutched a leather portfolio containing what Michael assumed were documents related to the important family matters that Camilla had mentioned. Whatever those matters were, they had been significant enough to bring the queen consort to Catherine's quarters without prior arrangement. Finally, Camilla spoke again, and her words revealed the depth of her understanding of royal dynamics. "Sergeant Harrison, I want you to understand that this is not about my convenience or comfort. There are family matters of considerable importance that need to be addressed, and time is of the essence. I'm asking you to reconsider your position, not as queen consort, but as someone who cares deeply about the well-being of this family." This personal appeal was perhaps more challenging for Michael than any royal command could have been. He could hear the sincerity in her voice, could see the genuine concern in her expression. But he also understood that security protocols existed precisely because emergencies and urgent matters could not always be anticipated. The moment he made an exception, no matter how well-intentioned, he would be setting a precedent that could be exploited by those with less noble intentions. "Your Majesty," Michael said, his voice softening slightly while maintaining its professional edge, "I understand that this situation is frustrating, and I can hear that your concerns are genuine. However, these protocols exist to protect all members of the royal family, including in situations where urgent matters arise. If this is truly an emergency, I can contact Princess Catherine immediately and arrange for her to authorize access or to return to meet with you." The offer represented a compromise that acknowledged both Camilla's urgent concerns and the integrity of security protocols. It demonstrated Michael's ability to think creatively under pressure while never wavering from his fundamental responsibility. The suggestion also subtly shifted the burden of decision back to Camilla, requiring her to decide whether her matter was truly urgent enough to justify interrupting Catherine's public engagements. Camilla considered the proposal, her expression revealing the internal calculation she was performing. To accept Michael's offer would mean admitting that her matter, while important, was not quite the emergency she had implied. To refuse would mean either escalating the confrontation or abandoning her mission entirely. Either choice carried implications that extended far beyond this single moment in a palace corridor. As she deliberated, footsteps echoed from the main staircase once again. This time the sound was different, heavier, more measured, carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected nations. Michael's radio crackled to life with a brief message from control. "Harrison, be advised, senior personnel approaching your location." The approaching figure was Sir Edmund Hartley, the head of Royal Protection, a man whose 40-year career in military intelligence and personal security had made him a legend within palace circles. His appearance at this moment was either coincidental or the result of carefully monitored communications that Michael was not privy to. Either way, his arrival would fundamentally change the dynamics of the situation that had been unfolding in Catherine's corridor. Sir Edmund Hartley's arrival transformed the atmosphere in the corridor with the efficiency of a master conductor taking control of an orchestra. His presence commanded immediate attention not through volume or theatricality, but through the quiet authority that comes from decades of making life-and-death decisions while maintaining absolute discretion. Michael had met Sir Edmund only twice during his 18 months of service, but both encounters had left lasting impressions of a man who could read complex situations with surgical precision. "Your Majesty," Sir Edmund said, offering a respectful bow that was perfectly calibrated to acknowledge Camilla's rank while maintaining his own professional dignity. "Sergeant Harrison," he continued with a slight nod that conveyed both recognition and assessment. Michael could practically feel himself being evaluated in real time by someone whose opinion would determine his future in royal service. Camilla's relief at Sir Edmund's arrival was carefully controlled but unmistakable. "Sir Edmund, how fortuitous that you're here. I was just explaining to Sergeant Harrison that I have urgent family matters to discuss with Catherine, and I was hoping to wait in her sitting room until she returns from her engagements." Her tone had shifted once again, now carrying the practiced diplomacy of someone who understood that this conversation would be far more nuanced than her previous exchange with Michael. Sir Edmund's expression remained neutral as he processed the situation. Michael watched as the security chief's eyes moved methodically, taking in details that most people would miss. The positioning of Camilla's entourage, the tension in Michael's posture, the way the private secretary clutched her portfolio, the subtle signs that indicated this was not a casual social visit. In those few seconds of observation, Sir Edmund gathered more information than most people could compile in minutes of questioning. "I see," Sir Edmund replied with the careful tone of someone who was gathering facts, rather than making judgments. Sergeant Harrison, please provide me with a brief summary of the current situation. The request was phrased as a professional inquiry, but Michael understood that his career was quite literally hanging in the balance of his response.
Michael's military training served him well in this critical moment. His report was concise, accurate, and completely objective. Sir, at approximately 9:47 hours, Her Majesty Queen Camilla requested access to Princess Catherine's private quarters.
I informed Her Majesty that Princess Catherine is currently attending scheduled engagements and is not expected to return until after 1400 hours. Her Majesty expressed a desire to wait in the sitting room until Princess Catherine's return. I advised Her Majesty that current security protocols require Princess Catherine's explicit authorization for access to her private chambers, and I offered to contact Princess Catherine directly to request such authorization. Sir Edmund nodded slowly, his expression revealing nothing about his assessment of Michael's handling of the situation.
And Her Majesty's response to this offer? He inquired, his tone remaining professionally neutral while clearly expecting a complete picture of the exchange. Before Michael could respond, Camilla interjected with the grace of someone accustomed to managing delicate diplomatic situations. Sir Edmund, Sergeant Harrison has been absolutely professional in his conduct. My hesitation about contacting Catherine directly stems from the sensitive nature of the family matter I need to discuss with her.
I was hoping to handle this discreetly without disrupting her public engagements unless absolutely necessary. This revelation added new layers of complexity to an already challenging situation. Michael found himself wondering about the nature of family matters that required such discretion, while simultaneously respecting the boundaries that prevented him from seeking such information. Sir Edmund, meanwhile, was clearly processing the implications of what Camilla had shared, his decades of experience helping him navigate the intersection of security protocols and family dynamics. Your Majesty, Sir Edmund said after a moment of consideration, I appreciate your desire to handle family matters with appropriate discretion. However, I'm certain you understand that security protocols exist to protect all members of the royal family, including protecting their privacy and personal space. These measures become especially important during times when sensitive matters are being discussed. The subtle emphasis Sir Edmund placed on sensitive matters suggested that he understood more about the situation than he was revealing. Michael began to suspect that this encounter was not as spontaneous as it had initially appeared. The timing of Sir Edmund's arrival, his measured responses, and his careful word choices all pointed to someone who had been anticipating this exact scenario. Camilla's private secretary, who had remained silent throughout the exchange, now stepped forward with obvious nervousness. Sir Edmund, if I may, she began hesitantly. The matter we need to discuss with Princess Catherine involves information that has recently come to our attention regarding certain irregularities that may affect family relationships and public perception. Time is indeed of the essence, as there may be media inquiries as early as this afternoon. The mention of media involvement changed the entire dynamic of the conversation. Michael understood that whatever was happening transcended a simple family disagreement or scheduling conflict. This was potentially a crisis management situation, the kind that could affect not just individual relationships but the reputation of the monarchy itself. Sir Edmund's expression remained carefully controlled, but Michael noticed a slight tightening around his eyes that suggested the security chief was now operating in full crisis mode.
I see, he said, his tone becoming more businesslike. In that case, we need to establish a secure communication channel immediately. Sergeant Harrison, please contact Princess Catherine's personal protection team and arrange for a discreet message to be delivered informing her that Queen Camilla requires urgent consultation on a family matter. This solution demonstrated Sir Edmund's masterful understanding of royal dynamics. By framing the communication as coming from Camilla rather than from security personnel, he maintained the family hierarchy while ensuring that proper protocols were followed. The message would reach Catherine without disrupting her public engagements, and she would have the opportunity to make an informed decision about how to proceed.
Michael immediately activated his secure communication device and began the process of reaching Catherine's protection detail. As he worked, he could hear Camilla and Sir Edmund engaging in a quiet conversation that was clearly intended to be private. Their voices were too low for him to make out specific words, but their body language suggested they were discussing contingency plans and damage control strategies. Within minutes, Michael received confirmation that the message had been delivered to Catherine's team.
Sir, he reported, Princess Catherine's personal protection officer confirms that the message has been received. They estimate she can take a private call within the next 30 minutes, or she can return to the palace immediately if the situation requires it. Camilla's relief was evident as she considered her options.
30 minutes should be sufficient for a preliminary conversation.
Sir Edmund, might we use one of the secure communication rooms while we wait?
I believe this matter will require careful coordination, and we should establish our approach before speaking with Catherine. The request was logical and demonstrated Camilla's understanding of crisis management protocols.
Sir Edmund nodded his approval and gestured toward a section of the palace that housed secure communication facilities used for sensitive government and family business. As the group prepared to relocate, he turned to Michael with an expression that conveyed both assessment and decision.
Sergeant Harrison, Sir Edmund said, your handling of this situation has been exemplary. You maintained protocol integrity while demonstrating appropriate flexibility when circumstances required it. I want you to remain posted at Princess Catherine's quarters until she returns, and you will brief her personally on this morning's events when she arrives. The assignment was both a vindication and a continuation of responsibility that Michael had not expected. By requesting that he personally brief Catherine, Sir Edmund was demonstrating trust in Michael's judgment and discretion. It also meant that Michael would be privy to Catherine's initial reaction to whatever crisis was unfolding, making him a key witness to historical events.
As Camilla and her entourage followed Sir Edmund toward the secure communication facilities, she paused briefly beside Michael. Sergeant Harrison, she said quietly, I want you to know that your dedication to duty has been noted and appreciated.
In times like these, having people we can trust to do the right thing, regardless of pressure or convenience, is invaluable. The acknowledgement meant more to Michael than any medal or commendation could have.
It confirmed that his decision to maintain protocols had been correct, even when it had seemed to put him in direct opposition to the Queen Consort. More importantly, it suggested that whatever crisis was developing, his role in protecting the royal family was being expanded rather than diminished.
After the corridor cleared, Michael found himself alone with his thoughts and the weight of responsibility that came with being entrusted with sensitive information. He understood that the events of this morning were likely just the beginning of a much larger story, one that could have ramifications extending far beyond the walls of Windsor Castle. His radio crackled with routine communications from other protection officers stationed throughout the palace. The normal business of royal security continued around him, but Michael now understood that beneath the surface of routine operations, a crisis was developing that would test the institution of the monarchy itself. The nature of the irregularities mentioned by Camilla's private secretary remained mysterious, but the urgency with which they were being addressed suggested something significant. As Michael maintained his post outside Catherine's quarters, he reflected on the complexity of royal service. The morning had begun with what seemed like a routine security assignment, but had evolved into a situation that required balancing competing loyalties, navigating delicate family dynamics, and maintaining professional integrity under pressure. His decision to uphold protocols had been vindicated, but he understood that more challenging decisions likely lay ahead. The palace around him continued its daily rhythm, but Michael now sensed the underlying tension that preceded major events. Staff members moved with slightly more urgency. Conversations were conducted in lower tones, and there was an almost imperceptible increase in the level of alertness that suggested everyone was preparing for something significant. An hour passed before Michael's radio brought news that Catherine's motorcade was approaching the palace. She had decided to return immediately, rather than wait for a phone conversation. A decision that confirmed the seriousness of whatever situation was developing.
As he prepared to brief the Princess of Wales on the morning's events, Michael understood that his role in this unfolding drama was far from over. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the courtyard below, and Michael straightened his uniform in preparation for what would likely be one of the most important conversations of his career.
The decisions made in the next few hours would not only affect the royal family, but would also determine his own future within the institution he had sworn to protect. As Catherine's footsteps echoed in the main staircase, Michael prepared to deliver news that would change everything.
Princess Catherine appeared at the top of the main staircase with the controlled urgency of someone who had received alarming news but maintained her composure through years of public service training. Her personal protection officer, Detective Inspector Sarah Mills, flanked her with the heightened alertness that indicated they were operating under elevated security protocols. Catherine's expression revealed nothing to casual observers, but Michael had learned to read the subtle signs that distinguished genuine calm from carefully manufactured composure.
Sergeant Harrison, Catherine said as she approached her private quarters, her voice carrying the warm professionalism that had made her beloved by palace staff. I understand there have been some unusual developments this morning. Inspector Mills briefed me on the basic situation during our return journey,
but I'd like to hear your first-hand account before I proceed with any meetings. Michael straightened to full attention, recognizing the weight of this moment.
Your Royal Highness, at approximately 9:47 this morning, Queen Camilla arrived requesting access to your private chambers. She indicated that she had urgent family matters to discuss and wished to wait in your sitting room until your return. Following established security protocols, I advised Her Majesty that access required your explicit authorization. Catherine nodded thoughtfully, her expression revealing neither surprise nor judgment. And how did Queen Camilla respond to this information? She inquired, demonstrating the careful questioning skills that had served her well in countless diplomatic situations. Your Royal Highness, Queen Camilla expressed some surprise at the protocol requirements and initially suggested that her position as Queen Consort should supersede routine security measures. I maintain my position regarding the protocols while offering to contact you directly for authorization. Queen Camilla was considering this option when Sir Edmund Hartley arrived on scene. The mention of Sir Edmund's involvement caused Catherine's expression to shift almost imperceptibly. Michael noticed the slight narrowing of her eyes that suggested she was processing implications beyond the immediate security matter. I see, she said carefully. What does this work? And what was Sir Edmund's assessment of the situation? Michael provided a thorough account of the security chief's intervention, the revelation about media concerns, and the eventual decision to relocate to secure communication facilities. Throughout his briefing, Catherine listened with the focused attention of someone who understood that every detail might prove significant. When he finished, she remained silent for several moments, clearly weighing multiple factors that Michael could only guess at. Sergeant Harrison, Catherine said finally, your adherence to security protocols was absolutely correct, and I want you to know that your discretion and professionalism throughout this situation have been exemplary. What happens next may be complicated, but I want you to understand that you acted with complete propriety.
The careful phrasing of her response confirmed Michael's suspicion that whatever crisis was developing went far beyond a simple family disagreement. Catherine's use of the word complicated suggested political implications, media considerations, and the kind of institutional challenges that could affect the monarchy's public standing.
Your Royal Highness, Michael said, Sir Edmund requested that I remain posted here to brief you personally and to continue security oversight as circumstances develop. I am prepared to maintain this assignment for as long as required. Catherine's appreciation for this arrangement was evident in her response. Thank you, Sergeant. Your presence provides a level of security and discretion that will be valuable as we navigate whatever developments may arise. She paused, considering her next words carefully. I'm going to change into more appropriate attire and then meet with Queen Camilla and Sir Edmund. During this meeting, I need you to maintain absolute security protocols for this entire wing. No unauthorized access, no exceptions, regardless of rank or claimed urgency. The emphasis she placed on no exceptions regardless of rank seemed to anticipate further challenges to security protocols as the day progressed. Michael understood that whatever information had prompted Camilla's urgent visit was likely to attract additional attention from various parties within the royal household and possibly beyond. As Catherine entered her private chambers to prepare for what was clearly going to be a significant meeting, Michael positioned himself to monitor both the main corridor and the secondary access points that led to this section of the palace. Bad Dad was wrong. Connecticut had made its security threats in Helena with a public offenderhood coach with an expanded responsibility. That this is accepted past. The ejection that suggested she was preparing for discussions that might require both disciplinations, that might require both diplomatic sensitivity. And then he knew that the system should be completed visuals not. Her demeanor had shifted subtly from the warm professionalism of their earlier conversation to something more formal, more regal, more reminiscent of the future queen she would one day become. Sergeant Harrison, she said, I'm proceeding to the secure communication facility to meet with Queen Camilla and Sir Edmund. During my absence, I want you to be aware that there may be additional inquiries about my whereabouts or attempts to gain access to this area. Standard protocol applies to everyone. No information about my schedule, no access to the quarters, no exceptions. As Catherine departed with Inspector Mills, Michael found himself at the center of what was clearly becoming a significant palace crisis. The normal rhythm of royal life continued around him, but he could sense the undercurrents of tension and urgency that indicated something major was developing. Staff members moved with slightly more purpose. Conversations were conducted in hushed tones, and there was an almost tangible increase in the level of alertness throughout the palace. Michael's radio provided periodic updates on security status throughout the royal complex, but the communications were notably more frequent and formal than usual. He began to understand that whatever crisis had brought Camilla to Catherine's door was requiring coordinated response efforts across multiple departments and security levels. An hour into Catherine's meeting, Michael encountered his first test of the expanded security protocols. Lord Pemberton, a senior member of the royal household staff who typically enjoyed broad access throughout the palace, approached with obvious agitation.
Sergeant Harrison, Lord Pemberton said with barely controlled frustration, I need to retrieve some documents from Princess Catherine's study immediately. There are urgent matters requiring her attention, and these papers are essential for the decisions she needs to make.
Michael recognized Lord Pemberton as someone whose authority within the palace hierarchy was considerable, but Catherine's instructions had been explicit and unambiguous. My lord, he replied respectfully, Princess Catherine is currently in meetings and has requested that her private quarters remain completely secure during her absence. I would be happy to relay a message about the documents you require, and she can address the matter when she returns. Lord Pemberton's reaction revealed the unprecedented nature of the security measures being implemented. Sergeant, I believe you misunderstand the urgency of the situation. These documents relate directly to the matters currently under discussion, and delaying their review could have serious consequences for the decisions being made. The appeal to urgency was compelling, but Michael remembered Catherine's emphasis on no exceptions, regardless of rank. His response demonstrated the kind of principled consistency that had defined his handling of the morning's events. My lord, I understand that the situation is urgent, and I don't doubt the importance of the documents you mention. However, my orders from Princess Catherine were explicit. No access to her quarters during her absence, no exceptions. I can contact her security detail immediately to request guidance on this specific matter. This offer represented the same kind of creative problem-solving that Michael had demonstrated during his encounter with Camilla, acknowledging the legitimate concerns while maintaining protocol integrity. Lord Pemberton's frustrated acceptance of the compromise suggested that he understood the broader context of the day's events and recognized that normal palace operations were temporarily suspended. As Lord Pemberton departed to await word from Catherine's team, Michael reflected on the escalating nature of the crisis. The fact that senior household staff were being denied access to documents suggested that the situation involved information requiring the highest levels of security and discretion. The careful coordination between Catherine and Sir Edmund indicated that whatever they were dealing with had implications extending far beyond private family matters. Michael's radio crackled with a message from Sir Edmund's office. Harrison, be advised that additional security personnel are being deployed to your sector. Maintain current protocols until further notice. Senior staff briefing scheduled for 1600 hours. The message confirmed that the crisis was expanding and that Michael's role would continue to be significant as events developed. 2 hours after Catherine had departed for her meeting, she returned with an expression that revealed the strain of difficult decisions and challenging conversations. Taking the building of the City of Kansas Wars, as someone who understood that they were now operating in an elevated threat environment, Sergeant Harrison, Catherine said as she approached her quarters, I want to thank you for maintaining security throughout this challenging day. Your professionalism and discretion have been invaluable during a very difficult situation. She paused, considering her next words carefully. What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels, but given your role today and your demonstrated trustworthiness, you need to understand the broader context. Michael felt the weight of impending responsibility as Catherine prepared to share information that would undoubtedly change his understanding of the day's events. The trust she was placing in him was both an honor and a burden that he knew would affect the rest of his career in royal service. This morning's events were precipitated by information that came to light yesterday evening regarding certain irregularities in palace communications and financial arrangements that could potentially affect family relationships and public perception of the monarchy, Catherine explained. The matter requires immediate investigation and careful management to prevent damage to institutional credibility. The revelation confirmed Michael's suspicions that the crisis involved threats to the monarchy's reputation and stability. The careful language Catherine used suggested criminal activity, breaches of trust, or scandals that could provide ammunition for those who question the relevance and integrity of the royal institution. Sergeant Harrison, Catherine continued, over the next several days you will likely encounter additional challenges to security protocols, as various parties attempt to gain access to information or locations related to this investigation. Your commitment to maintaining proper procedures, regardless of pressure or claimed authority, will be essential to protecting both the investigation's integrity and the safety of all family members.
Michael understood that he was being entrusted with a role that extended far beyond his original security assignment.
His actions over the coming days would help determine whether the royal family could successfully navigate whatever crisis they were facing and whether the institution of the monarchy would emerge with its credibility intact. As evening approached and the immediate crisis management activities continued, Michael maintained his post with the understanding that his morning decision to uphold security protocols had been the first domino in a series of events that would test the very foundations of the British monarchy.
His courage to say no when it mattered most had demonstrated the kind of principled service that institutions depend upon for their survival and integrity. The Guard's courageous stand had become more than a moment of professional duty. It had become a symbol of the commitment required to protect not just individuals, but the principles and traditions that define constitutional monarchy in the modern world.
And as the palace prepared for the challenging days ahead, Michael Harrison stood ready to continue serving with the same unwavering dedication that had defined his response to an impossible situation on a Tuesday morning that would be remembered for generations.